We're recording to the cloud. Randy, are you in a restaurant or?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm at the leadership conference, right?
Mm,
I'm in a hotel lobby.
exponential? Is that correct? Okay, all right. Is that an all hands on deck for Florida district folk?
Yeah, it was. So I'm not an NYI president, but they wanted all leadership here, so
Oh,
we're
wait, are
here.
you at the leadership for Nazarene Youth International, or are you at the, okay,
NYI. Yeah.
MYI, not the exponential conference for church planters?
Oh, sorry. No, I'm not at that.
All right, all right, all right. So yeah, we got people double and triple booked all over the place. Well, I'll share a screen.
So, Randy, you're at NNU.
Yeah, just ran into Dr. Daniels not too long ago too.
Oh, goodness sakes. So, you're going to have to stop by my office at least and say hello.
Wait, you're at NNU?
I'm at NNU, Thomas Building. So, you go straight out the door of the building you're in right now, skip a building. That building on the far side is Thomas Health Science Center. I'm up on the second floor. Not right now. Right now, I'm at home, but tomorrow, if you're still on campus, I'd love to say hello.
I wish I could. We fly out tomorrow morning. Oh, I didn't know about
Oh,
Rebecca. I'm sorry.
no, that's all right.
All right, can everyone see the slide? Okay, all hearts are clear. All right. Um, yeah, we'll keep Jayden. So we'll just start with our usual greeting. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Open up those mics, and then lift up your hearts.
Lift them up to the
Lift
Lord.
them to the Lord.
Let us give thanks to the Lord our God.
It is
It
right.
It is right to give thanks and praise.
It is right and a joyous thing, even if you're on the road, Ryan. So we'll just keep praying that you're listening, but you've got those eyes firmly affixed in the traffic around you this evening. As always, we start with just a reflection on discernment. We're kind of wrapping up part two as we go into the break, just so you guys know that. And so, unless my numbers are off, you tell me if I am. I think we're discerning the sign of the times. Chapter 6 was this week. Am I correct on that? So we talked about people last week, this time events. So again, it's just time for reflection out of the reading. So any reflections, something perhaps you jotted down for your journal?
When I first started reading the chapter, I thought that Henry Nouwen was just basically telling us, you're not in control of anything, you're not in control of time, so just give up. And I felt like that's what he was getting at the beginning, but I actually wrote down this quote here that I thought was really helpful. He said, in retrospect, many of the good and important things that have happened to me in my life were completely unexpected, and many things that I thought would happen to me did not occur. As I reflect on this reality, it is clear that God is present in the events of my life, yet I act and speak as if I am in control. But if the future is not in my hands, then I have all the more reason to stay in the present and give honor and glory to God from where I am, trusting that God is the God of life who makes everything new.
Yeah, that's a great quote. I can't remember what page that was on. I'm just curious. It's if you're reading a
It was
Kindle.
on page 87 on my Kindle.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Yeah, at the very bottom of page 87, after he talked about daybreak. Yeah, that's um, you know, who knows where you or I will be next year on June 7th. So why worry about it? God will surprise us. That's a pretty fascinating way of thinking about where he's going before it's over. Other reflections, thoughts?
When he's talking about time at the beginning of the chapter, I just appreciated this thought on page 85, right in the middle. He says, to gain this wider perspective, we first look backward to see how the seemingly unrelated events of our life have brought us to where we are now. And that kind of ties in with the quote that Randy just brought up. But it is interesting to think about, the things that have happened in my life and all of our lives probably, how they brought us to the exact moment we are right now. And my wife and I happen to be in a stage of life where we're very content and very happy with where we are. But I could not have predicted it, a couple of years ago. So it's just interesting, and I like to have that long-term perspective. So I appreciated that he was pointing that out.
Thanks, Tyler. I appreciate that. It's a great observation. Anything else? Again, not looking for a right answer, just reflections or thoughts.
Just perhaps to add a little humor. My husband and I we were both the oldest children in our families, and so there was a lot of debate that that happened in our household, and we always felt like if there was something we agreed on, that must be a sign from the Lord that was the direction we should take. Just silly, but yeah.
No, I think, and I assume that's more around critical events can reveal God's divine purpose, not current events of crisis that reveal God's crisis, and from that standpoint. So that great observation. So, Ron, just a note, by the way, and your screensaver on your monitor behind you does some really intriguing things every once in a while, but I didn't know if there's a way to turn that screen off, just your gaming. I assume it's a gaming console kind of screen. Nope.
It's not a gaming console. It's actually it's just connected to my whole system, everything. It's the additional screen that I teach with. So
Okay.
I can, give me 1 sec. I will adjust it for you.
Okay. All right. I didn't mean to lose him, but hopefully we'll get him back in a second. There we go. There you go. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's just every once in a while, some of the screensaver. My line is, you never know what kind of screensaver you have until it's too late. So we'll leave it from there. The other thing I will mention this. I do think this chapter he really is trying to balance the little things in our lives with the major events around us in life. And his sort of reflections around civil rights is at times, for lack of a better way to say it, spooky for me as someone who has now endured 2 iterations of similar kinds of crises in the United States, and our inability at times to fully pay attention to what's truly happening around us. So that's just a moment that and I'll just say these last couple of lines in the chapter, he says it says it may be a bit disappointing initially that when we look for clear answers to the burning questions in our lives, we're left with only titles of books, experiences in nature, names of people, and a series of seemingly random events. They seem too lean and superficial to constitute a doctrine of discernment. God cannot be caught once and for all or contained for all time in a system of titles, names, natures, and events. This is looking back over the part. That God lets himself be suspected, not revealed at this point. I suspect God's been at work in those things. Therefore, when we pray to God or search for God in silence, we learn to recognize him in many little ideas, meetings, happenings, signs, and wonders along the way. That's an interesting kind of fitting close to this chapter. You may be just suspecting where God might be at work in this class. Who knows? Before it's all said and done, maybe that suspicion is even a better word before it's all said. But I hope at least the book is providing a resource for reflection and thought as you go along. Okay. Any other comments, or we'll just move along from here?
I have a question for you, Dr. Blevins, if that's okay.
Sure.
It was actually for you specifically. So I've loved this text, and it'll probably be one I pick up every year or so just to renew and refresh. But when I'm reading this, and then we're finishing up our Odyssey plans, it made me feel like, am I supposed to be doing something else? And so I'm just curious because you were obviously intentional about having us read this book as we're going through our canvas. What was the thinking behind pairing discernment with what we're doing now?
Well, I probably the best way to say it is I was designing the course. I mean, I think everybody who's ever taught knows you design and then you're not in control. So every good plan is great until it meets reality, to say the least. But I did think that Noun provides a kind of reflective frame for the midst of all this other busy stuff that we were doing. And truthfully, did I map each chapter exactly to the assignments in the class? No. This has just been one of the pleasant surprises myself as this course has sort of unpacked itself over the years. So there's been a little bit of tweaking, but having now and just invite us into ways of thinking and reflection. Actually, and I'll go ahead and say it. I condensed the design book to get us in a little bit better shape this time going into the break. So as now invites us to reflect on vacation, when we come back together at the beginning of next semester, a lot of times people in the past were wrapping up their Odyssey planning just as he was inviting them to do that. I usually had to tell people, I'm not asking you to quit your jobs. So maybe this is just helping to cover that at this point in the semester instead. So we're just listening for things other than hearing the part 3, which I think now it'll take us even a little deeper as we go along. So prayer request, we'll keep Jaden in our prayers, not knowing where she is. I mean, she's been pretty steady and pretty faithful. I know this week last week when I was sort of wrapping up how we would engage the week, she might have had other things that just combined with what's going on. I think I thought Joe's interview was last week for ministry, and hers was last week, if memory serves me. So I'm just assuming that I'm just hoping it's not anything profound. Ron, how are you doing? How's your health? I heard you were saying you're on the mend, so I know you didn't make it last week, so I'm just checking in on you.
I'm doing better. I mean, I'm on 6 different medications. They tell me I'm not supposed to stress myself out, but I, had to return to teaching. And teaching 8th graders, when you leave them for an extended period of time, they make you pay for that when you come back. So, yeah, we had to have a heart-to-heart, literally, and sit down and say, look, my doctor says if I get stressed out to a point where I start to have symptoms again, even with the medication, they're going to make me resign from teaching. And so I need your partnership in making sure that doesn't happen, because I would hate to see you guys without a teacher because of that. And they, I talked to them like grown-ups, and it was really cool. The response has been very, like the ones that you would think wouldn't respond are the ones that respond the most, which is kind of crazy. Like, there's one kid that used to give me a hard time all the time, and now he's the one, if someone's out of line, he's like, come on, dude, you know better. It's just kind of weird. It's kind of cool to watch them policing themselves. And it's actually, so I guess they want me to stick around. So
Good. At least until you give the next test, and then whether online is
True.
at that point, if all the toilets back up simultaneously, they're sending a different message at that point.
No, they've actually been pretty amazing, actually. in the midst of all of this, my mom, her part of this going into this was my mom's health. Very, and so we had an episode where she had an infection, and they were going to have to amputate, and or the infection was going to take her, but she wasn't strong enough to have the surgery. So, but there was a window, and the doctors went for it. The surgeon went through it, so they did amputate her left leg up to the knee. She made it through the surgery, but the part that I would want to share is just, so there's this kid. His name's Angel. He's probably one of my roughest, toughest, been through a lot of stuff kids. But he lost his mom 2 years ago, and so I had to leave early because my mom was going into surgery, and my dad wanted me to go pray over her, and the principal was like, "You need to go be with your mom," because they didn't know if she was going to pull through. And but they moved up the surgery before I could leave class. There was like a timeline thing, and so my dad calls me. He's like, "Hey, you need to pray over your mom right now." And so they're getting released to PE. And so I'm like letting them go to PE. I called the other teacher, the PE teacher, and said, "Hey, can you receive my kids? I gotta do something for my mom real quick." And so I start praying over. I have my eyes closed. I'm in the corner of the classroom, so the kids are going out, and all of a sudden I feel someone touch me. And of course I look up, and it's Angel, and he's praying over me. And like, yeah. It's one of those moments where never in a million years you'd expect him to do it. But he didn't care if anybody made fun of him. He didn't care if anybody laughed or giggled. No one did, but he just did it. And after, I said amen, and I hung up, he started walking to PE, and, I called him back, and I'm like, "Hey, I just want you to know how much that meant to me." And and I said, "Of all the kids here, you understand what I'm going through, and I'm always so heartbroken that you had to go through this." And he just looked at me and he goes, "Mr. A, I just don't want you to lose your mom." And I was like, yeah. So, and like I said, that's what it's all about, those moments right there. But I'm pouring into them, and then in a moment of need, there's a young person that I don't think I'm reaching, pouring into me. So God is good. Yeah. So there you go. Sorry to
All the time. Thanks be to God. So
yeah.
talk about a kairotic moment.
Yeah.
But really just a moment of deep grace. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate
Yeah.
that. And we'll continue keeping your mom in prayer as well as you. Thank you, Ron. Thank you for that. Other requests or needs?
I have one. It's warming up here. It was 91 today, and so I'm beginning to walk, and I'm not I'm not able to make a block, and so this is kind of a lingering effect. So they're gonna try to do some breathing treatments and things like that. Please lift me up in prayer. And then at the other seminary where I work, um, I have a study partner named Jennifer. Both her grandmothers have become ill in the last month. One one has reached a point in her dementia. I apologize. I'm at Starbucks across from the hospital. I didn't think about that, but dementia, and so the families come to realization that they can no longer care for her, and they need to look at assisted living. And then the other grandmother has been in a nursing home and has not been cared for. and they're very concerned about if she can make a recovery. So please, if you would lift up Jennifer.
Thanks, Con. And it sounds like it's the RSV that's still lingering with you, so we'll just keep that in prayer.
Well, I wasn't walking much when it was colder. Now that um, now that I'm going outside, it's but yeah, and also I pray for my technical skills because obviously I don't understand this seminary system. I'm used to Populi, and so this is totally different. And as soon as I can somehow make contact with IT and stop applying for jobs with them at NTS, hopefully I can get an appointment. So.
Okay. Any other requests or needs? Randy, we'll keep you in our prayers for safe journey back. I know the planning is important. For those of you who are not connected to Church Nazarene, we have a very large event every 4 years, and I think you guys are already in some kind of reflecting upon the next major event, since I think this time they fast-tracked it, so it's in year 3 instead of year 4 in Utah, of all places. So we'll just keep praying. The head of USA Canada is actually in my Sunday school class. I don't teach it. We're just colleagues in the same class. And so I get to share his prayer burdens on a pretty regular basis also. But it's the downside of living in Kansas City. So not that Justin's in a Sunday school class with me, but it's just the fullness of the denomination being constantly around us at times. Can be good, can be a downside also. All right, let me just offer a word of prayer as we go forward, okay? Gracious God, I thank you. I thank you for the moments that you are truly at work in our lives. When we least expect it, those small moments, those unsuspecting moments that, now and reminds us of, but actually Ron has given us in this testimony of Angel and just the fullness of your grace at work in that tender moment. Pray, Lord, that for all of us, there's occasions of grace that just evoke gratitude are constantly around us, and we're aware of them. But thank you, Ron, and thanks be to God for Angel's love and care in that specific moment. Pray for the needs for Ron and his health, for his mother and her journey. Just pray that through the work of the surgeon and now through the work of doctors that she can be restored to viability and health and regain her strength for Ron as he continues to wrestle with pancreatitis and the aftermath of that through medication, but ultimately by the power of your spirit, you would restore and provide healing and wholeness. Do pray for Kyle and his continued respiratory distress and for the wisdom of discernment, for his engagement with technology. Pray for Jennifer and her needs, particularly around her grandmothers. Mindful that for many of us, these days we are caring either for young children or for senior adults. And just pray, Lord, that you would provide us the wisdom and the grace to do those things well, and that you would keep those in our care. Well, inside your love and inside your gracious caring. I'll name Jaden not being here, just praying, Lord, that whatever is keeping her from joining us tonight is not too dire. Pray, Lord, that it was not a part of my humor last week that resulted in miscommunication, but ultimately that whatever she's involved in this evening would be fulfilling in her life. Do pray for Ryan as he continues to drive, that you keep him safe and that he can join us in class soon, but also that this would be a time not only of listening to instruction, but also gracious fellowship with his friend. Now, Spirit, be our guide in the midst of all the myriad things that we'll engage in this evening. Ask this in Christ's name. Amen. Well, I'm going to, I know the slide's still up. I'm going to share a couple more slides briefly, and then we'll probably do a breakout session. So let me just kind of mention, we're going to pause for just a moment, just to remind ourselves where we are in the class. Next week is spring break. So we will not have class next week, though I suspect some of you may end up being pretty busy next week regardless. And we do have, and I'll go ahead and remind you, I have a slide a little bit later, but that you do have a book review, a comparative book review that's coming due as well. So just keep that in mind. But in a way, this whole class is on transformational leadership, yes, but it's through this language of innovation and design that we're trying to engage it. And as I said from the very beginning of the semester, there are a lot of ways of understanding leadership. I mean, and there are excellent courses that engage leadership. We'll talk a little bit about adaptive leadership later in the semester, but we have another class that's designed around that. And there are other models of leadership. But this approach to transformational leadership really is anchored around two kind of key concerns. Number one is how do we lead people, the church or some other expression of ministry, into a future that we might not know. So in the face of what we would call discontinuous change, where we know what that future might look like is uncertain, how do we lead? And believe me, there are a ton of really good skill sets for leading for other times that we might get very good at. Definitely when it comes to skill sets that are required even for high pressure responsibilities and jobs. And I am thinking, Ron, I'm thinking about your military background, for instance. But Rebecca, I'm also thinking about nursing. And I mean, oh my goodness, if there's not a place where there's high stress and leadership, caregiving and leadership exercise there around often protocols and routines, though. Since my wife is a nurse, sometimes both her appreciation to be under the direction of a doctor, under the protocols, and her consternation with some of those protocols simultaneously. So I see that hand on occasion, or at least I've heard that voice when we're working with high stress environments. But we actually know routines and we have strategies that at least empower us in the midst of those. What happens when leadership's taking us into an uncertain future? Or maybe those routines, those strategies don't seem to be working well. And we're not trying to manufacture something, we're merely trying to engage in that moment. And the second key challenge for transformational leaders is then how do we empower others as we lead them as well? You'll find this particular definition very high up, sometimes even above the one that I've already introduced to you. Just transformational leadership, you'll find a number of very good books dedicated to that. Actually, and Rebecca, I'm going to mention it again, that the field of nursing has taken this on, nurse education, and has utilized the language of transformational leadership in a lot of places as a mode of empowering others through the leadership model. I just want you to hear the tension between those. It's one thing to empower people. It's another thing to guide people through futures that even you yourself might not know exactly what that looks like. But how do you manage both of those simultaneously as part of the challenge of transformational leadership? So that's been the goal. Well, we've been doing it through skill sets development. I'm not, we've read, albeit a couple of small books and small treatises early in the semester, and the rest of the time we've just been exploring these two skill sets. One is, well, if you're innovating, how do you manage risk? Welcome to the world of entrepreneurship education. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. And in the midst of managing risk, how do you figure out how to build your way forward instead of already have a plan that will take you where you need to go? welcome to design thinking. And so these two skill sets are at work in the class, really thinking about that unknown future, both in managing risk and, well, we may not have the answer, but we've got to start moving. So how do we learn by doing and move forward through design thinking, design learning? The implicit second piece, how do we empower others? Well, the implicit piece of the book that we're reading in Designing Your Life is how to empower people to take agency in their own life through life design. Now, there are other ways to empower them. We're going to have other readings later, but that's implicitly there. In theory, by now, right now, as we go into the break, you should have in hand a business model canvas, and you should have in hand Odyssey plans. And by the end of the semester, one of those two will result in either a full out business plan or it will result into a more robust singular Odyssey plan. So just to say, the goal was to get you to this point in the semester so you would have both of those handles so you could start thinking forward. Because after the break, we continue to work, but then we're really nuancing a lot of what we've done the first half of the semester, and we're doing other readings and we're kind of expanding the scope of the class that way. So for those of you who've had classes where you did a whole bunch of reading at the front end of the class, it's like a giant funnel. And then toward the end of the semester, the funnel takes you down to a project. This class is not designed that way. And at this point, you should have two conceptual handles that now you should be able, I'd say in the next couple, 3 weeks, know which of those you really want to go with. And you can be nuancing that as we expand the base of our reading going forward. So it's not quite an inverted version, but it is different in what we're trying to accomplish. In theory, I normally don't show this slide till after the break, but I figured just because we've been so episodic, I thought maybe this might scare you. Ron, be careful. I don't want to engender a cardiac arrest here, or it may help you. But in a way, this whole first half of the semester, if you've wrestled with the Canvas approach, the entrepreneurship education, and the design approach, or if you've liked them, but you weren't quite sure what the heck to do with them, well, I mentioned The Karate Kid once before. Yes, it's one of my favorite movies. And whether you like the original version or whether you like the second one with Jackie Chan, I'll let you and Jaden Smith, I'll let you figure out which version you like. But yes, we have been sort of learning skill sets: wax on, wax off, pick up the coat, drop the coat. If you've never seen The Karate Kid, you'll probably have to check it out next week. Either the old version or the new one, just depends. But we've just been kind of walking through these things and we're trying to learn key components. So, in a way, entrepreneurship really is how do I manage risk in light of future action? It encourages you to think entrepreneurially, but if you've wondered, definitely if you mess with the finances this week, you're going, where is he going with this thing? Ultimately, everything in the entrepreneurship education is not to eliminate risk, it's just helping you to manage it so that as you move forward, you're positioned as well as possible so that you can commit to an idea and know that you have done due diligence to at least have a good idea of how you might move forward. I hope that makes sense to everybody. And so through the ideate, asking your vision and asking you how much you can risk, position, how does your idea fit and what will it take, the commit, who do I influence through marketing and how do I implement? Yes, the financial plan is important there. Later, we'll come back to refining. So how do I build resource and then launching? How will I lead? It's interesting that leading becomes the key question toward the end of the entrepreneurship education because you're trying to put together the elements of a plan that at least mitigates, it never eliminates, but mitigates the amount of risk you may have to face. Welcome to good entrepreneurship education. Designing actually is just another skill set. How do I really learn to know where people are? How do I define what the real problem is and not get bogged down in a gravity problem? What are the options out there? And we talked about that last week through divergent and convergent thinking. And what would an answer look like? which we'll spend a little more time on tonight, but really the answer is not the final solution. It's merely a prototype you'll test and try out. And then what will I learn from that testing as I continue to build toward the future? So up till now, as you have wrestled with the curriculum, it really is saying, in light of an unknown future where I'm trying to empower people, how do I, in some ways, think strategically and take seriously the level of risk and think strategically moving forward so I can mitigate, but yet be creative? Or does this context, this moment, this challenge actually just invite me to build my way forward? Not take on too much risk, but build my way forward because I just don't know whether or not I can put an entire strategy together. And these two sort of skill sets, I hope you see, are trying to just sort of anchor you as you think about what transformational leadership looks like. Does that make sense to everyone? Now, tonight, one more thing over the break. This is coaching, so I'll make this quick. I'm recording, so you'll have this later. Just a reminder, you have a comparative book review that's due, and you have up to 4 books. You choose 2. You don't have to read all 4. Pick the 2 that interest you, and I alluded to those earlier in the semester. In a comparative book review, what is Dr. Blevins looking for? It's not a big book review, so the first thing is basically what's the gist of each book. So you start the book review by just basically telling me what is each of the authors, and you can do this seriatim with one book and then the other. What's their intent, their kind of key thesis or their argument? I mean, the gist of it. How do the chapters help support that argument? What is what is it that the writer really wants the reader to understand? And that should be enough to just basically say, look, this is what if you were having a cup of coffee, some of you are in coffee shops, it should be fairly simple to think about. And somebody says, hey, what was Labria's book about? And all you have is the table of contents in front of you. So can you basically say, give the intent of the author, the key thesis of the book, how that argument flowed, and why that was important? And believe me, most people have done that by writing abstracts, a paragraph. So I'm hoping you can get that done in just a couple of paragraphs, no more. I am not looking for massive summaries of both books. Then, after you've done that, sit down in the second half of the review and just compare the books. How do the readings inform each other? What's the intersection with the course content? How might the books inform their own readership? And what in the world has this got to do with transformational leadership? Is one way to think about them. Or how might they help us better understand entrepreneurship or design thinking? But that gives you space then to have a conversation between the books in the second half of the review instead of driving yourself crazy writing massive summaries. They're not big books. The biggest book there is Root and Bertrand's book. And a reminder, he's offering more of a cautionary tale. The other 3 are offer basically complementary with an I and an E to what we've been doing in class. But that one's a little bit bigger and a little more cautionary. But I wanted you to have at least one book like that to consider if you want. But the other 3 rarely run much over 100 pages. So I'm not looking for an extensive critical review with those. I hope that helps everybody. Probably should have saved this slide for after the break. So now we're into the business model canvas. And I know Ryan's on the road. I noticed the one that they have in Kaufman is a PowerPoint, and it's supposed to be designed to actually enter the data in the boxes so that you can see that unfold. So hopefully you're able to do that. But again, it's software, and I'm going to say something that Kaufman doesn't say it all the time is a lot of times it's easier to download that. If you were trying to do that while you were in the web, you could have found yourself in big trouble. Same thing with the financial planning model. So those are documents to download. If you didn't utilize that, I sent you a Word document earlier today that you can return to kind of engage in. And so if the PowerPoint doesn't work as well, you can you can sort of add one of these in. The one you see right now has elements in it filled in because that was one I was working with early as we were envisioning ministerial entrepreneurship and planning for a grant. So these were some of the kind of points that I was using as we were going along. In a moment, I'm going to put you guys in small groups for just a couple of minutes. Ryan, at that point, I'm going to kick you out just to give you guys a chance to talk to each other about where you are with the strategizer. Some of you have posted one online or had sent one to me by email, but I wanted you just to be able to look at each other and talk about it. By end of week, I need not a hard copy, but I need a visual version of the strategizer for me to look at. So that's part of class participation. So it's got to get done this week. Okay. One way to think about that as we move into groups is think about it in relation to the curriculum itself. So, when you look at the middle box, the value proposition, where were some of the elements when you were writing out your pitch, or even some of the things you were thinking about with brand names, some of the marketing pieces that could fill in that value proposition. And so the curriculum's been designed to kind of help you move toward that. When you're thinking about things like customer relationships and channels, customer channels, and segments, customer segments. Well, the market analysis should have provided that for you. If you've actually engaged in the market analysis and you have that, that component inside the curriculum should be helping to fill those boxes in. When you think about partners, activities, and resources, the business concept and the minimal viable product design work that you were doing in the Kaufman curriculum should help you identify a lot of those elements. And when it comes to cost revenue analysis, the very thing that was being asked this week, that should also be able to help you start thinking about the cost structure and the revenue streams. So there isn't in a way, there's not a whole lot new as you've been working the curriculum. It's really more how's the curriculum been working for you in filling out this business model canvas. That's really the most important. I hope that makes sense to everybody as I go forward. So I'm going to pause. Any questions for me up till now? No?
Dr. Blevins, I just need a reminder. How do you want this canvas submitted to you?
You can send it. That's why I sent the Word doc. You can literally type in, or if you open up the PDF and you have inputted it into the PDF, you can print screen and or print as a PDF, and it should populate that way so that it can just be sent to me as a file document. It's probably the simplest way. I can
email then.
Huh? I'm sorry.
By email then.
It can come to me that way. I know a lot of people are struggling. Again, this has been probably the biggest technological learning curve semester I've had. I'm going to share the Kaufman's the Moodle site for just a minute. And so I'm inside, discuss designing your life before class. Remember that assignment that was due on Monday nights. Since I'm grading class participation, I'm just reminding people of what the intended rhythm and flow was. Some of you I know how to type a text by hitting reply, and you type in. I'm picking on Jaden's for a second. But what you might have forgotten, so I'm just reminding everybody again, is if you click on advanced, this little bitty button at the bottom, and if you go back, I covered this in the video the first week that's recorded and available to you. But when you click on that, all of a sudden you get all kinds of options. It starts to look like a Word document, and you get this little place called Files, where you literally can just drag and drop a document into this box. You have to be careful of the size. So the maximum file size is pretty small. I've tried to get them to change that. And so if it doesn't take it, that's when I say email it to me. But you can actually put a number of files in there. That's the thing that drives me nuts. So you could break it apart. I don't want you to do that. But it is important. The more that we can get into the Moodle site, the more you have reference of each other's work, and you can you can provide informed comments to each other. One of the limitations, and I'm just going to name it, of this first half of the semester, with people struggling to get things in technically to either Moodle or Canvas, is we can't reference that work to each other to get really good feedback from each other. Does that make sense? And this has been the oddest semester for that. So I will say, no, Tyler and Jaden have been probably as consistent. Now, I mean, let me just name it. We've had all kinds of crises, from pastoral changes for a couple of you to a workload. Rebecca, I know there are some surprises for you in the work area. And Ron, I mean, a slight health problem got in the way. We acknowledge that as part of the challenges. So I know it's been episodic because your lives have been episodic, but it has limited the ability to have conversations with each other around the vision. So if you think back to those first couple of weeks when you were talking about your idea, ideally tonight in the conversation, you could look down and say, I've got these 4 elements going really well. Let me slide this up. So I know my partners, I know my customer segments, I got my value proposition, but I'm not quite sure what all I need for resources. You could share that. Everybody could kind of see it and offer mutual exchange. And not having all those there, at least I'm not sure that we'll all have access to that. Does that make sense? So rather than put you on the spot, I'm going to put you in small groups. But Kyle, go ahead.
So I was gonna ask, is this something like when I get in my small group, I could, excuse me, I could just email or put in, what are we working with? Zoom or Zoom? I can put it.
You may be able to put it in the chat. I can't guarantee that in the
Okay.
breakout rooms. That's again the limitation. This is where Moodle is your friend, because you can always have Moodle open. And so, and people can literally access it directly from the Moodle. So let me, as a case in point, and I'm mindful of our time, so I'm only going to take um, going to see if I can do one thing very briefly. And done a lot of show and tell in the class, and I know for some people it's important, for others it's not as important. So bear with me 1 second. And promise not to take more than a minute or so more. Hang on. Ah, things I'm learning myself with Mac that I had forgotten. So this is my limitation. So let's see. Right. Well, I'm not seeing it. 1 second more. So let me back this. Can everyone still see the Moodle screen for just a second? Okay. So I'm going to back up. There are easy ways to get in and out of this material. And I'm going to hit a reply, and so, and hit advanced. and then go over here to folder that you cannot see. And that, yeah, that's a good example. So Kyle, for instance, the business model canvas you sent me would be too big to add here. So that becomes part of the limitation by email on real time. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. But I am going, one thing you will find in the announcements already is a PDF, and it does include the names of your two breakout groups. And so Ryan, at this point, I'm not sure while driving, you can move to a breakout group on a cell phone. So just so you know, you may have to drop out. But I'm going to give you guys no more than 10 minutes. Instead of talking to me, talk to each other about where you are and how you feel when it comes to the strategizer. Does that make sense? And then I will close the groups and we'll take a 5-minute break. And then we'll come and we'll move into design thinking next so that we can get a little more material covered. All right. Everybody feeling comfortable with that flow?
Sure.
Okay. And I really, other than saying, show me a piece of paper right into your screen, which I did not want to make you do. This gives you a chance to kind of talk about where you are. Well, that's the design of your life, so we'll get to that one. I may make you do that one before it's over with, Randy. But for the other one, at least with the strategizer, I thought the simplest way is to create the groups and let you have a conversation. Rebecca, Ron, and Tyler, it looks like you'll have a full group with the social ventures component. Let me back up. Since Jaden's not here and since Ryan's on the road, Kyle and Randy, you may just be talking for a couple of minutes around the strategizer instead, okay? So. Okay, I'm going to open the rooms and you should see an invitation for that. And 10 minutes from now. See you guys.
Version of my business canvas to that same
Email.
discussion stream
Oh,
in the course.
okay. Let me share. And then um, my only, so I'm going to share screen again for a reason. So bear with me. And I think everybody can see each other. So let me just make sure you all, because when I go into share mode, I know all of a sudden I'm talking and therefore on the recording version, you see just me, but I want to make sure you see each other. But to go into, let me go back and I'll just refresh this. So I am literally in week 7. Let me just do it this way. And I'm in week 7. I'm under uh, discussing designing your life before class. You could have put something in, and Tyler, I know you and Jaden, I think, did do some reflection on your work in Canvas, which is what that particular thread is the design. But for tonight, for everybody else, under week 7, before the end of the week, under discuss designing your life before class, that very first forum is a great place to leave for me all the different elements. And Rebecca, I think this is yours, right?
Correct.
Okay, and I can save that. And then just so everybody knows, this is just a quick and dirty way of getting around it. So there it is. Okay, very good. And thank you. So that's there. I'm not going to make everybody go through theirs tonight. What I really wanted to make sure though is that I had versions from everybody so that I can talk a little bit about what to anticipate the first of right after the fall break or spring break, excuse me. Does that make sense to everyone? And Kyle, just so you know, also, and I, um, what I was able to do with yours, the PDF was too big, but you can always screenshot the document and it becomes a PNG file. Those of you who know the tech, and those are really small. They're wonderful files for uploading. So anytime you've got something that's big and ugly that you need, that's ugly as in just too big to upload, you can always screenshot it. And Randy, here, this is uh, your three plans, and this is perfect. So just so I'm just going to name it. Not that the plans are perfect, but and nothing to say about the artwork because this is exactly what mine look like. So let me just name it. But the visualization, you will be surprised once you start to see each other's visualization. So let's make this particular forum the place all that gets done. And I will send an announcement out and remind each other as well with a link directly to this forum. So, but this is by the end of the week, when I go looking for documents, this is what I'm going to go looking for your working versions of both your business model canvas and your 3 Odyssey plans. Does that make sense? Okay. Well, meanwhile, back to the PowerPoint. Just a couple of words. Again, orienting ourselves. We're not going to spend a lot of time. We're wrapping up commit. Though we only looked at half of the options inside commit, and there are a lot of financial considerations. Now, quick question: why would this be difficult for some ministers to kind of go through the commit component? What would make it hard for them? Just general ideas. What comes to mind?
Well, I
And this
think,
goes,
oh, go ahead.
I think for us, it might think it's all strategy, all following a plan, and maybe not so much, doing what Noun's talking about and listening for discernment and maybe following a guiding principle like that. So I think that'd be tough for me, that it's all strategy and maybe not so much being led.
Okay. Ron and then Kyle. So Ron, can't hear you, Ron. Sorry.
All right. Okay, so I lost my thought, but basically, when we're looking at the commit part, I think as pastors, a lot of times the financial issue is a balance, right? We're not making lots of money, but God is blessing us in ways to take care of our families and provide and do all those things while we serve the Lord. And so, unless you could be assured that this is something that God wanted you to pursue, it would be difficult for you to, because you begin to start thinking about, does this take away from my ministry? Is this something that's meant to support my ministry? And these are all like discernment questions that would make it difficult. Now, if all of that lines up, then yeah, it's great. But if there's an opportunity or a chance for it to take away what God has called you to do, I think that would be the very big deal.
Yeah. Kyle, anything else?
Oh, I was just going to say, I was highly influenced as a pastor by the ostrich model of a pastor dealing with money. I would stick my head in the sand. And so, yeah, I think I know for me, it may be very uncomfortable. And this is a reality that we have to deal with. And obviously, in this point, we're talking there's a possibility we can't move to the next step unless we not only address this issue, but the way you're training us or the way you're helping us is we've got to do it in an elevator pitch, which means there needs to be confidence.
I agree with that. So, but I agree with everything everybody said. So let me name one thing that's already in the curriculum if you haven't read it. A lot of times when we approach finances, finances are real, but also finances are a language. So yes, if you're short money, you know it. But more importantly, if you think about money as a kind of language that helps you then to go through this process of predicting and then measuring and analyzing, and you understand that the revenue and income is a part of your sort of discernment of the sustainability and the of what you're trying to accomplish, it frees up some of the hesitancy of what we engage in. And so I'll just name that for what it is. Over the years, again, we're still working the spiral. So we're literally in the business model, even as we start talking about finances at this level, much less the business plan, where when you do present it, you have to demonstrate that, yeah, you thought through the particularities of the finance because of the way in which it communicates right alongside other modes of communication. So if you think about finance as a mode of communication that is strategic, and demonstrating the efficacy and your ability to manage risk of any given venture, that's a better way to understand what's happening. Now, I'll be upfront with you for some people. Whoops, I went too fast. When you start getting in the spreadsheets, so Tyler's like, welcome to my world at this point. And I would imagine for some of you, Rebecca, I mean, as a chair of a section inside the school, you probably have to see spreadsheets. Ron, you run a business. Spreadsheets is life. But for a lot of people, that's not the case. And definitely when you start getting into the spreadsheets, it can be frustrating. As a matter of fact, I definitely put up a video link tonight that just occurred last week where a person was trying to train the trainers on how to use the spreadsheet inside FastTrac. So I thought, what better example than to provide that for you, including a lady at the very end who actually runs a degree in accounting, who looks at the trainer and says, you know, this is just not complex enough for us. To which the trainer said, well, if you've got people finishing a degree in accounting, they probably could create something instead of having to use this. And so it's that same humor we've talked about in the past, is that those people are very logically oriented, design day timers for people who don't really want to be bothered with them. Welcome to what these spreadsheets are about. Very quickly, and I'll make this as quick as I can. Oh, I must be clicking on something inside. Hang on. There we go. One thing that's really important is called the entrepreneur's trinoculars. I'll make this very quick because you'll spend some time in it. Because we'll spend a lot of time around business conversations, really around sustainability. So if there's nothing more than saying there's and Randy, I hear this language it may be restrictive, but I want you to hear that what people are asking is there sustainability built into the model? Is really what they're asking, that business model. And a lot of times, without a real clear sense of the why it's sustainable, it's hard to keep people's interest. They may think it's a great idea, but if I just don't feel like it's sustainable, why should I be there? So it's a language we need to sort of acknowledge. And every new venture includes the three biggies: the finances needed for startup. When do you know that the venture is profitable? In other words, there's a return. And if you don't like that word, keep the word sustainable in front of that one. But also the key concern of cash flow. When anyone's run a business or done anything has had to face those three questions. What do I need to bring something new into being? Then when will I know it's sustainable? In other words, it's got enough revenue to overcome the expenses, and I can trust that it has that capability. But knowing that I also have to operate it on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis, how do I make sure that I have enough cash flow to assure that sustainability on a regular basis? That's all that the planning, that all that Excel file and the management of that work is what you're trying to do, is basically manage those three components. What do I need to start, and how do I know I can recoup those costs? When will I know that, and I'll keep translating the word, though I don't mind the word profitability, but when do I know it's sustainable? And how do I manage cash flow in the interim are really the key concerns when it comes to the financial oversight of a new venture. Many of us, and I'll say it, including myself, have probably had a lot of experience when it comes to the management of an existing budget where you have certain basic revenue inflows and you have certain income and expenses. Church budgets are built around that. And until there's an emergency, like a sudden loss of a number of congregants, or a certain influx of a number of congregants, or a gift in kind, usually the management of that's fairly standard. And most church boards are really gifted at managing the money until those crisis moments occur. And then these kind of core components, how do we sustain ourselves in the midst of them, become really important as we go forward. Something to keep in mind as we think about doing the business model canvas, because in a way, until you get that cost, those last two boxes where your cost and your revenues match, and I'd say match after you have endured your startup costs and you know what they are, and they match in such a way that you can assure that you have sustainability on a month by month through cash flow, as well as at the end of the year showing sustainability. Until you've got that, it's still, you're not communicating fully the ability of that venture to accomplish its goals. It's just important. I started the night by saying every good plan is a good plan until it meets reality. But trust me, the more you know how the finances change once you start, the better you've done that advanced work, the better you can work the cycle and really know where the adjustments need to occur as time goes along. Does that make sense to everyone? This is also why a lot of entrepreneurs actually do get financial help. I haven't had time to show videos in the class, but this is one of the times where having a good CPA is sort of like having a good doctor, someone you can trust to help guide the process. And Tyler's like, I'm about to launch my venture, so can we talk before it's over? I do have a maxim that with every venture, you need to get paid. Right? Not get rich, but get paid. This is one of the weaknesses of a lot of social ventures, is that we tend to do things in such a way we launch something as a labor of love. If you hear Kendra Cressy Dean, but then it becomes a burden, and not merely just a burden on ourselves, but sometimes on relationships and family, going back to those personal values. So I'm a big believer that anything you engage in, that it should be able to be part of your sustainability, not merely something you add that then you have to absorb in your own life. Now, you may not get paid well starting out, but this becomes the question of the financial planning. How do you know that at some point you know this is a value added to your own life alongside what's going on in others' lives? So probably enough to be said tonight. Okay. Concerns on that? Okay. If you go for the business plan, the financial side, it will be really important. So this is why we skip over some of this for the business canvas, but for the financial plan, I mean, for the business plan, you'll have to have those numbers as you move forward. Well, let's talk about Odyssey. So now we can go back to, I don't know, my screen's got messed up for a second. Bear with me. This is how I break computers. So So there we go. So Randy, I've got yours right up in front. Everybody can see Randy's. Okay. Just thoughts on your own Odyssey plan, just popcorn. So I just wanted to put this one up for a split second, then I'm gonna take it down. Which one of these was easy and which one of these was difficult to do? Particularly the Odyssey plan of just continuing what you're doing, thinking about the one you can't do, or thinking about the one, and you heard my language last week where I think they say there's no shame, but my line is that you have enough social capital that you could actually do it, and at least somebody wouldn't be taking your ordination credentials away from you, or your nursing license, Rebecca, just to keep everybody in the conversation. Just general thoughts. Anyone?
I feel like the hardest one to do is can't do. So it's like, if I can't do this, why am I spending the time thinking about how I'm going to accomplish it? That was very hard for me.
Particularly if and that really a lot of times works hard because of calling and how they're attached at the same time. So I understand that. Other thoughts? Anyone?
So I'm someone who does a lot of planning for the future, and I think about the future all the time. And I'm always thinking about my 5-year plan, my 10-year plan. Not in those words exactly, but that's just my kind of my default. And so the first plan was really easy on here. It was just the plan that's in my head. And I thought, well, that's a good plan because I'm always thinking about it. I'm always modifying it, with every new life circumstance. So it was hard to come up with a plan after that felt robust because, but at the same time, I mean, I get the point of the exercise is to get us outside of our box and help get the creative juices flowing and think about what's possible. And it did help me do that. So, when I got to the, what would you do if you just did something totally different? That kind of got me outside the box a little bit and helped me dream, which I think, I hope will influence the actual life plan that I take going forward,
Okay. Yeah, and that one about just probably that one is for me even challenging, though I have a tendency to wander into things that get me in trouble anyway. So I'll just some of you know that 2 years ago I was actually beginning to think about, well, what major projects will I just sort of write over the next year and a half to kind of contribute to the end of my career. And along came the Lilly Endowment when God has a better plan for your life kind of thing. I felt like Lilly was doing the famous, what we call district superintendent um, invitation to something creative and new. So life circumstances surely can bring those on, to say the least. Others, Kyle?
This might sound crazy, but it's me. Um, what if, so I guess the project that I've been working on, I've always seen as a side thing to me going back into the pastorate. And then a couple of experiences, and tonight sitting here and reading the discernment book, I'm beginning to wonder, is this what God is calling me to? And what if what I thought was the side is actually the center?
Yeah. And I'll just say it this way, not that I'm asking you to not consider going back into ministry, but if this gives you an opportunity to play that out through the Odyssey plan, conceptually, let's just use that kind of language, and we'll go a little bit further down than that. It gives you an opportunity to ask those questions. We've had students arrive in this program who were in those kind of liminal spaces, and so the Odyssey plan just gives you the opportunity to sort of tease that out. Is one way to think about what we're doing. Okay, well, to move on, mindful of time. What I was kind of curious, the way the book wraps up covers a lot of topics. I mean, obviously, again, they're thinking about the book was originally written with people probably starting careers for the most part, though if you saw some of the illustrations, they did include people who changed careers as a part of their narrative. So they, even as they conducted the curriculum around well, basically seniors and juniors at Stanford originally, they I think they've discovered this is bigger than that. Um, any observations from the book that you did want to include beyond the Odyssey planning? I threw some things in here that were just topics like choosing happiness, discernment as decision making that uses more than one way of knowing. So the logical, rational is not the only mode. The failure immunity approach, rethinking jobs, building networks. Any of those that caught your eye? Rebecca, it looks like you want to say something. I can't hear you.
Well, I think this failure is opportunity. It has been really key um, for me. It's sometimes I think God uses our failures to help us to rechannel in a direction that maybe He wants us to go, but that we just didn't have the mindset to think of or to consider. But now the situation has brought things to bear that a new path is, kind of revealed itself. I feel like that's happened a lot in my life. But if it's really easy, you see failure to get that a little bit of self-condemnation going, and then the temptation is to give up, right? But we have to work through that, and I guess I related to that piece.
Yeah. And I'll just state that this is one place where sometimes education has been the competitive nature of education in general in the United States, where a lot of times even failure almost feels like a character reference, and where a lot of times it's just an opportunity to improve. Is I think something that in life we see more outside of the academic arena than we actually see sometimes in. Of course, all of you are praying that this is not going to be an opportunity for you that Dr. Blevins is going to give you at the end of the semester, right? So I'll just let you learn by flunking you and having you come back next year. No, but I do think you're right. I like the way, again, it's a very simple crosshatch. If you didn't see it, that they ask you to do, they didn't even provide you a fancy form. I think they're wise not to do that. But just for you to actually take a look at the times where things are not going well and be honest with yourself. I mean, this is a little bit of the confessional tied into it, but where sometimes it was just a screw up and or something happened that you didn't have full control of. Are there weaknesses, things that are there that should challenge you, or whether they are growth opportunities, something you can learn from the failure, is a great way of kind of navigating those moments. And frankly, um, uh, and it's true even in my own life that there are times where we waste a good failure, where we actually do internalize it in one particular way rather than seeing it as an opportunity to learn and to grow. And I, I just recognize that. For some of you, even as you enter into mid semester and you're taking account of the first half of this class, it might be a small exercise you might choose to do, not necessarily then to ask either for forgiveness or a better class participation grade, whatever. But it's just an opportunity to do that. I say that a little bit tongue in cheek. I hope you understand that. Um, one thing I do want to point out is that in some ways, all these components, this idea about how do you choose and how do you let go and move on versus agonizing or dealing with uh, uh, well, failures or rethinking what a career, having career conversations versus job interviews or building networks. All of these inside the basically the writer's heads, these are merely toolkits, skill sets, if you will, of how you prototype your own human experience, your own life. And so they're offering these as a way of really kind of going, how do I now construct and move forward in and through the Odyssey plan to understand how my own life can be tested out and learn and move forward in and through the nature of who my own life. They don't name it that way, but in some sense, they still are following the IDEO's format of prototyping and testing. And just knowing that in the test of life, there's a lot of things you might learn. Hope that makes sense to everyone. Couple of quick slides. I know there's only 15 minutes left, so I'm going to do some talking. Again, I really want you all to post your Odyssey plans so that I can see them. But those Odyssey plans are in a way no more than prototypes. Last week we ended right at prototype. Remember, we talked about what goes into design thinking. There's empathy, defining, ideating, which is all that creative work that we did last week, those brainstorming techniques, basically engaging in divergent thinking and then converging to at least an idea that you want to move forward with. And then you construct a prototype. Now, when I do this in classes where your life's not attached, but just in design thinking, and I'm currently doing this with a couple of different initiatives right now, I often say, blueprinting is, well, prototyping is either creating or following a blueprint. It's one way to think about it. Yeah, it can be a literal prototype. And when you ever look at design thinking, they're really big on balsa wood and cardboard and glue and actually building something that looks weird that eventually might look like something that's sophisticated. But they believe in the concreteness of it. Most of the time in ministry, unless you're in children's ministry, it works really well there. We're really trying to think of how do I articulate what a prototype looks like? How do I concretize it? And so I often advise people to say, show me something that is a prototype. So if you're thinking about what if we create a new resource? Maybe it's a whole new set of resources. Then for an artifact, think about a handout. What would a handout that describes that resource and what it does look like? Or if you're putting together an event, maybe you're starting a brand new event that you've never done before and you want to prototype it. Well, think about creating an event guide and what would that look like that sort of summarizes what the event looks like up front so you have that visually to do before the event actually occurs. What about a process? I'm a big believer in playbooks, not handbooks, but playbooks. So maybe you're changing a process in a church, maybe you're changing a process of something that's going on inside an organization and you want to really rethink how you do something rather than say we're going to create a handbook because the minute you do that it sounds like, well, and I don't even have mine close, a manual that can't be changed. You ever been involved in one of those where everybody argues on the fine points? Create a playbook, open binder. Think about it like a playbook a coach uses, where they change the plays as they go along. And it's a conceptual shift to say, what if we go ahead and just do a playbook and we know kind of what the process looks like, and we've got tabs for every component in the process, and then we'll put certain ideas inside those tabs, but then we can adopt and adapt them as we go along. Playbook language gives you permission to be creative, as opposed to handbook language. As somebody who works within higher education, every time I hear a handbook, my eyes roll because I know definitely it's going to cause 25 people to get upset about some sentence that's got to get changed. But a playbook is something that you go, well, so show me a couple of different plays of how this might look, and then you can compare those. But what you're trying to do is actually lay out the steps and the blueprint, and then you get more detail later. Actually, it's fun if you can give me an artist rendering, which is exactly why I keep pushing you to think about the business model canvas and the life design, because they're visual in the way they're designed. And when you do that, a good prototype is where engineers and artists come together and contribute. The engineers really like really the fine tuning of the blueprint, but the artist is really good at providing the design rendering. And a good prototype has elements of both as you go along. So what we're doing here with this idea of the life design prototypes is that you're kind of engaged in both. One reason is, and you may have scanned over it, but it's really important. They talk about prototyping your idea, your Odyssey plan through conversations and prototyping through experiences. And if you remember that part of the book where they were asking you things like, who should you have a conversation with? Now that you've got this Odyssey plan, what kind of experiences do you need to do to sort of test out that plan? That is equally important if you're going to do this as your major project at the end of the semester. So in a way, one way to think about it is that in a way, the Odyssey plan is a prototype as both a noun, but also a verb. As you visualize those three plans and as you've had those up, you now have done conceptually a working prototype that now you're going to test out through the prototyping testing process to see whether it's got merit or not. So Kyle, to your thought, this is the time to do that. So my questions is, as you've thought through the three prototypes, I think Rebecca, I'm gonna pick on you for a minute. I think one of yours was around, was it woodworking that you had in mind? Am I getting that right? And so, and thinking about, well, what if you could just, I think you were saying as after, with retirement, and I put up Rebecca's three plans. It's in a grid form. Um, my first thought was my wife, the nurse, would really appreciate the grid form. Okay, so I'm just going to name it for what it is. But I really do want to see it. I want to see a little bit of artistry before it's over. So it's just fair warning. But so I'm going to pick on yours for just a second. So who would you talk to find out what it would take to put together a woodworking shop? I mean, and who are the artisans and craftspeople you know to have those kind of conversations, as well as business owners? But more importantly, if you wanted to do that, what kinds of classes might you want to take? And who offers them? And I'm just picking on Rebecca for a second, but that means that, yeah, it may not be that NNU has a woodworking initiative, so I'm not sure you could get tuition remission for that at NNU, though they may have something like that inside their arts and sciences or their arts component, but it might mean a community college that offers those kinds of classes. And could you actually go and find out how long the class is and what do they cover, what's required, so that you could actually name here's a class and here's the pieces that we do. And all you're doing is fleshing out the Odyssey plan to know that, yeah, maybe this could actually work before it's all said and done. I hope that makes sense to Rebecca. She's grinning the whole time, but comment?
Well, that was born out of that's just a fond memory of something I used to do with Dad, right? And so when he passed, I inherited some of his tools, and I built one workbench out in the garage. And so all of those tools are still boxed up, sitting on top of the workbench. And every time I walk by, I think, I'd really like to do something with that, you know.
Well,
But I keep walking by it.
I hear you. But at this point, and you do not have to do this for me, but if there was enough of a niche, let's use that language for a second, that you go, well, who do I know? That if I'm a little rusty at doing this kind of stuff, but who do I know that I could be a coach and help me at least get the tools unboxed, out on the bench and ready to go? Who's the kind of person that come alongside me to help me just do that? And then what kind of classes are required, or who would I talk to and to even know and know this isn't, I mean, it could end up being a whole nother venture. I don't want you to feel that threatened that you have to now all of a sudden feel like you've been seduced into doing another FastTrac venture, but it's really more who's out there who's done this kind of business and who do I talk to? So in a way, the Odyssey plan can become the very thing that you can engage in, and it just gets bigger by asking these kinds of questions. Even if you are thinking about moving in, so this goes back to Kyle, to something else, the side gig becoming the center gig, who do you talk to in a way that really helps you so that maybe somebody, instead of applying for a bunch of things, you get an offer out of your interest and engagement. That's a different way of thinking. That's exactly why they included that in there, to really help you get the depth of testing an idea out. And obviously, in your interviewing with other people, if they see something in your idea and your vision for yourself, they're going to be confirmatory in that before it's all said and done. The other thing I would say is that that you should think about networking. Who do you need? Who's your tribe? Who's your people? And as you think about the Odyssey plan, who will be those people? One of the reasons they constantly ask you about your plans for your family is because they know that that's part of your networking and the very people you want to keep connected as a part of the Odyssey plan. I hope this is making sense to everyone. But the 3 Odyssey plans is not the final project. It's picking one of those and then going through all these other components to really begin to test out the prototype that you've played with to see whether it has real efficacy and how you might adjust it. And so you just keep working the loop. Does that make sense to everyone? So we're going to I'm going to pass this. So basically, let me just say you are here right now as we wrap up the class tonight. And I'm looking at where we've gotten to this point. And I need to say this knowing that not everybody has had an opportunity to be here every week. And no matter how much I record, it's not the same. Mainly because staying awake for 2 hours is tough enough when you don't have at least other faces to look at and just my voice droning on in the lecture. I know that, okay? But right now, just so you know, we've spent a lot of time just laying 2 rails. We have a good portion of the first half of this semester is just getting those rails down. Now, the cross ties are the theory. We've had one, Kenneth Cressy Dean's book. We're gonna add some other cross ties as we go along, starting with those comparative reviews that we'll spend a lot of time talking about when we come back into this semester. The long-term vision is the makerspace, the major project. That's the long-term vision. Where are you in light of where the rails are and moving toward that? Well, on the entrepreneurship side, the FastTrac side, well, we may have covered 60% of the curriculum. We've been through 3 of the 5 components, but we've really only covered about 50% of what that curriculum has to offer. And I'm just going to be upfront about that with the options and the race to try to get things done. And for some of you, and I get to see all the activity in the background. So I'm just going to name it this way. Some of you are going 50%, feels more like 20%. That's okay. This is why I wanted to get us here. You wouldn't know what all you're facing unless you were at this point in the semester. Okay. In the design thinking, well, we've done the reading. We've got that 100% of the reading. So we got the conceptualities down. And I've done enough lecturing, I think, to give you sort of the gist of what design thinking is trying to accomplish. But you're only about 70% in because until you test that prototype, till you actually apply the Odyssey plan through some kind of testing mechanism, you really don't understand what is going on inside design thinking. I keep telling this, and I'm going to say it one more time. The prototype is not a plan you now implement. The prototype is an idea that you're about to test to see what you can learn from. And that is radically different from all the strategic planning and all the other ways in which we do planning, because you're not there yet. This is just an invitation to learn and adapt and build your way forward, as opposed to, envision the plan, build the plan, work the plan. No, this is think about a prototype, and then what will you learn from that prototype in order to move forward? It's just a really nuanced way of engaging. Now, inside that, you've had a minor project, the business model canvas, but you have a major project that's a possibility for the maker space. That is the business plan. Or under design thinking, you've had a minor project, the 3 Odyssey plans. Just the 3 conceptually that you've thought up in your head that hopefully you're ready to give to me by the end of this week. Or the possibility of 1 master Odyssey plan with more prototyping to go. So I hope you hear that. So by the end of the week, I hope I have a rough draft of the 2 minor plans, of which a couple of weeks from now, I'm going to ask you to finalize one of those as just your preliminary that you're done with. And I'll evaluate that at that point, and you'll pick the other one to pursue for the makerspace presentation at the end of the semester. Am I clear? Making myself clear? Okay. So there's nothing new other than I mean, we'll keep working the curriculum, but there's nothing new in the expectations. This is where we are. Are you behind? Well, I've already suggested maybe the failure immunity is a good example, because now just all I'm asking you to do over the break also is recognizing where you ought to be in the class as opposed to where you can be, but partially because of life circumstances. I mean, pancreatitis is a pretty good reason for not being where you need to be, Ron. So let me just name that. But now, what do you need to know that you need to know in order to get to the end of the semester is really the challenge. Or the tech challenge, Kyle, is a challenge. But what do you need to know that you need to know to get to the end of the semester is a bigger question. So the rest of the semester will really be just defining and exploring through those projects, kind of getting our heads around the rest of the thinking process. We'll be comprehending, that's a term, demonstrating comprehension, that we really know at least how to work one of these processes really well. So no, you will not have to launch your venture. I wish Jaden were here. She would just probably go, thank you, Jesus, for me saying that. But you know that you know how to launch a venture because you have a credible business plan that you can present at the end of the semester. Or no, you're not quitting your job tomorrow to start a woodworking project. So Rebecca, go to your husband and say you're off the hook, okay? Don't panic yet. But you know that if you wanted to do that and you wanted to take retirement early, you could and see that as a part of your life. That's what I want you to be able to do, is that you can comprehend what these 2 processes might look like. One thing I'll say as we close tonight, and we're running over. So can you change? Does that mean that, in a couple of weeks, at the end of the break, I'm going to ask you which of these 2 approaches in which makerspace are you going to do? Are you going to do the social venture, or have you picked one of the Odyssey plans and that's what you're going to focus on? So I'm going to ask you by the end of the break, which of these 2 is your major goal? What's your ultimate goal and what's the penultimate? So yeah, I need to finalize the 3 Odyssey plans, make them a little bit better, but I'm turning them in. I'm not going to worry about them anymore. And I'm pushing for the business plan. Or this is my business model canvas. This is the best I got. And I'm going to go find something to really, in one of those Odyssey plans to pursue. But my one last comment is, but can you change? Can 2 weeks later you meet a dose of reality and what you thought was the big idea and you go, that is not going to work. Can I punt? Yes, you may. And you can come back to me and you can negotiate changing to something else. But I'm hoping that you will exit the spring break ready to go, move forward, knowing that at least you're comfortable with both of them. So if you have to switch, you can, and you won't be in too much trouble to make that switch. Well, one thing I will say, sometimes people will ask me, could I even change my venture? I really do want to do the Kaufman FastTrac, but I've kind of stalled out on what my original idea is. Can I come up with a different business? And some of you remember Jaden Early asked for that. And I was said, fine. I will tell you, yes, you can. So if the venture that you've been working on, Ron, if podcasting becomes something else, but you still want to think more about launching a new venture, you can, because I'm not as worried about whether you have a world-class podcast or an independent financial management service as I am how well can you work the steps of the grammar. So in some ways, the venture is a vocab, but actually working the process of entrepreneurship, education, and developing the venture is really the grammar that I can always apply, regardless of whatever the venture itself is. Hope that makes sense to everybody. Same thing with the Odyssey plan. Maybe if you go, well, maybe there is a little shame attached to this one, so maybe I need to go do something a little more traditional. Yes, you may. I'm not so much worried about the idea, the vocab, as I am watching the grammar. So can you still take me through the process and show me that you know how to do that? Hope that makes sense to everyone. Okay. So how much work and effort's left? Well, a lot of that depends on how comfortable you feel now with these two different components. How comfortable do you feel inside the Kaufman FastTrac? There's still going to be some real questions to ask. I mean, they're going to raise a lot more material in the last two major elements. Refining is just that, refining the idea you already got, and then positioning it. I mean, then launching it is what does that look like? So you still got some skills to learn. Same thing, design thinking, as you have those conversations, as you look at that, you may discover things about your Odyssey plan you never had in mind to begin with. But how comfortable are you right now? That's the major question for you to be reflecting on as we go into break. Okay? All right. Well, I'll hang for a couple of minutes in case there's specific questions. Let me stop sharing. Oh. And I will just again remind everyone to make sure I have visual representations of your business model canvas and your Odyssey plans in the forum by the end of the week. I hope that that's really clear. And those of you that have been uploading them, that's a good start. So I hope you hear that. But that's the one thing I would like. Over the break, also a reminder, I'll send this out in the middle, is a snapshot of your journal reflections up to this point in the semester. It can be a Word document, can be photographs of screenshots, however you've been keeping your journal. I'll be asking you to submit that as a part of the break as well. But these are just touch points as we go along for the semester. Okay? All right. Well, I will be praying for you over the break, and I actually look forward to seeing you guys in 2 weeks. Hopefully, we'll have other things to talk about, but we'll keep coming back to these questions. Well, and hopefully by then, everybody will be kind of in similar space so that when we're in small group conversations, it's a little more meaningful about sort of teasing out. We may break differently. I may actually put people that are pursuing the venture in a small group and those pursuing prototypes in a small group, but I'll know where best to place you after we finish the spring break. Okay? All right. Prayers, blessings to everyone. We will see you again online. I'll hang around. I'm going to stop recording, and I'll make this available.